Hey everyone, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. One of the fundamental beliefs that we have at AFN is that change is where opportunity happens, and that the best way that you can take advantage of opportunity in change, that you can find that opportunity, is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. And so our goal is to bring in really diverse perspectives for folks to be able to help all of us learn. What we do in our events is we have a subject matter expert come on. We talk with them about those things that are really important to their expertise and how that can benefit folks in our network. Today, we've got John Privitera with us. He is a colleague and friend of mine, and so really a privilege to be able to chat with him about this today. He has a very impressive career, and he's also a pretty humble guy, so I'm going to brag a little bit for him. So 28 years in the U.S. Navy, 21 of them as a Navy SEAL, where he ended up as a senior chief towards the end of his career. Not an easy career, a lot of hard stuff that he ended up doing, and I think a lot that contributed into what his career has looked like since then. He was a colleague of mine at both CrossLead and the McChrystal Group, where we were helping organizations communicate and organize themselves a lot better. He's an executive coach. He helps out with leadership development now and is one of my partners in our efforts to drive our Chief of Staff network that we recently launched for AFN. So John, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here. Thank you to everybody who's taking the time out of their day to listen in and participate. Awesome.
So John, we'll just kick off, and we're talking about Chief of Staff stuff today. What your experience is with the Chief of Staff, how you think about it. What we know about the Chief of Staff position is that it is widely defined from organization to organization. So thinking about your experience and how you look at it, it's going to be meaningful for just adding a different flavor of how we think about it out there. And we do know for sure about the Chief of Staff position that you're asked to juggle lots of different balls, and the expertise that you're asked to come in with can be pretty widely varied as well. So just to get us going, how would you describe the Chief of Staff job?
When I describe the job, I see the Chief of Staff first and foremost as a force multiplier for their principal, meaning they represent an extra set of hands. Often our principals are juggling multiple balls, and if the Chief of Staff is there to catch one before it hits the ground or take on new and emerging projects, that certainly falls within the role. And an extra set of ears relationally across the organization. My ability to create relationships that my principal necessarily can't, and the information that provides me with allows me to paint a clearer or more complete picture for my principal. Another mouthpiece. I can reiterate and represent the priorities of my principal across the organization as I'm interacting with people. And certainly another set of ears. As I gain more information, I can use that in pursuit of achieving whatever the goals are. I also think as a Chief of Staff, you have to be part coach and part confidant, right? Coaching to the extent that the leadership team will allow you to coach them, certainly, but the coaching skill set, I think, plays well into the role.
Okay.
And then from a confidant perspective, if the relationship with the principal is such, being that ear, being that partner that the principal can vent to, can bounce ideas off of, can consider a thought partner, I would say those are the top three ways that I would define the role of Chief of Staff. But understanding, just like Anne-Marie was saying 2 minutes ago, the definition across industries is constantly changing, constantly evolving. And a lot of my experience as a Chief of Staff was in the startup world. So not companies that were fully formed and mature with processes in place, which afforded me a lot more opportunity to kind of see what I could do.
Sure. Well, one of the things you mentioned was you are trying to take care of relationships that the principal couldn't necessarily have or build or, facilitate. Why do you think the principal can't do that? And why do you need a Chief of Staff to be doing those things?
But in the experience that I was referring to, I was chief of staff to the CEO and co-founder as a startup, and the size of the company that it was, that CEO was more concerned with raising money and signing contracts with the big guys, with Walmart and Costco. His attention and focus down into the organization were certainly not his top priority. He expected me to make sure that I kept a finger on the pulse and created relationships across the organization that helped the overall priorities. Brian, the CEO that I'm referring to, he's a data-driven guy, that he's a math quant. He created this algorithm and gave no consideration for the people that were part of, like, hey, the algorithm works, this business is going to be a success. Well, it doesn't really work that way, but I'll handle the people part for you. We were small. We didn't have an HR department. So I considered myself the chief people person.
Okay. So you get to catch a little bit of everything, right? We don't have an HR department. Guess what, John? That's your job.
That was one of the things that drew me to the role. It was undefined.
Okay.
There were no guardrails. It was like, hey, you need to help me. I need your help. I was originally brought in to coach the co-founder and operations officer. And in the process of coaching him, I met the rest of the senior leadership team. When the funding finally came through and the first contract signed was in Miami, the CEO reached out to me and said, I need you to come on full time. I can't do this by myself.
So no guardrails can be a very scary prospect for some people out there, just saying like, hey, I don't know what you got to do. You just got to do it. What do you think it is about you that makes that A, appealing, and B, that you're good at it?
About me?
Yeah. Why don't you want any guardrails, John?
I appreciate an unpredictable environment. The pressure that an unpredictable environment offers allows for me, that pressure, that consequence, that allows me to focus and really bring my A game to a scenario. When the pressure mounts, all the other distractions kind of fade away. I like an environment that is undefined because it gives me space to try different things, to be adaptable, to try to be agile. I don't like being constrained necessarily, but these are the rules. I've never really been very good at rule following.
All right. Well, yeah.
And soft skills, right? Too. The other piece to that, right, is I didn't come into the role with a lot of hard skills. And I didn't have a lot of depth of understanding functionally across business. I've had to grow that slowly. But what I thought about the chief of staff role was the soft skills that I'd accumulated over a couple of decades in the Navy, dealing with diverse cultures and people from all over the world. I can relate to people. And I think that was very helpful.
Okay. Yeah. So you brought the soft skills. A couple of the comments that I've heard about John in the past is he's a good guy to operate in the seams, in the cracks. Just expand on that a little bit. Like what do cracks look like within the organization? How did you fill it, and how would you expand that to the idea of the chief of staff filling those cracks?
Yeah, I would say that I had a light bulb moment. 04, 05. I was deployed to Iraq. I was working in a role that at the time I thought was the best use of my skill set and experience. I was forced into a role where I had no experience. It was not tactical. It was operational and strategic. It was an environment I was uncomfortable with. And I quickly learned that I could have a much greater impact on the organizational mission by the network that I created of people in the room, by pulling all the different disparate skill sets that each one of them had, and then applying it to a particular mission or set of requirements. And it was at that point I went, wait a minute, the impact that I can have on the battlefield individually based on my set of skills doesn't even compare to the impact that I can have on the greater picture by establishing this network of people that are, and it was all about purpose. Everybody was swinging for the same goal. Mm-hmm. And that kind of level set, it helped for transparent information flow. It helped with trust, that underlying burning bush or whatever you want to call it. That purpose was unifying.
Well, it's a massive shift in mindset, because when you think about the things that you're being tested on, that you are lauded for, that you were rewarded for up until that time, is like, hey, how fast, how far can you swim? How straight can you shoot? Things like that. It's like all those things that are just about you and the talents that you can bring to it. The organizational piece is not something that is readily rewarded or recognized when you're going into the SEALs necessarily. I don't think, like, you're going through buds and things like that. It's just like, all right, here's the things that you got to do. Can you react to that statement?
I think you hear elite performers and elite organizations often say mastering the basics is the single most important thing you can do, because mastering the basics allows you to reduce your cognitive load, so that when you find yourself in an undefined situation, with a non-standard situation, you've got more bandwidth that you can bring to the. So transferring that mindset, master the basics, to now you're in, or I'm in a networking situation where, wait a minute, what are the basics here? Which is the part that is going to allow me to move in and out of this network? And and what it is people skills, or putting people first, or just caring about people, like truly caring about people and paying attention to what it is they have to say and what motivates them and what's important to them. Those are the basics. If you've got that down, now you can start understanding where the points of connection are, or a term I like to use, the chief dot connector.
Yeah.
Or the chief network officer, like we say all the time.
Right. So, all right, you're coaching the COO at Quantum. CEO calls you and says, like, hey, I can't do this on my own. What do you think he saw in you that was like, hey, John's the guy for the job on this?
I didn't realize it at the time, but the CEO, who had been a general manager of a group of car dealerships, really didn't have a concept, or I will say a dated concept, of what leadership is. And leadership in the car industry, it definitely needs a revamping. It's a very macho, old school BS, not comfortable with it type of mentality. But what I learned was he was comfortable operating in a mature structure, but didn't know how to create a process or some scaffolding that then he could hang the company from. And I think what he saw in me, with the background that I was bringing, the ability to work in an undefined environment, and he was aware of my consulting background, he brought me in because he wanted me to apply that structure and process.
Okay. So, we talked a little bit about some of the experiences that you built up, right? Your light bulb going on and how you could impact things with these people and relationships. When you got into the chief of staff job, what did you feel like you were not prepared for? What surprised you?
Being a generalist as a chief of staff, I believe, is more valuable than having deep knowledge in one particular department or function. But I know, in saying that, I know that I can say that because my principal was the CEO. So I needed to have a working understanding, knowledge of each department or function, only to the extent that I could help facilitate the goals or the priorities. Like, I'm never going to be the CFO. That's not my thing. But if I were the chief of staff to the CFO, my knowledge in that area would have to be much deeper. That was my biggest limiting factor, was my my functional expertise across departments, especially in the automotive industry, which I had no experience with. And I came to understand, you don't have to understand what it is that your people are doing to lead them correctly. If you've created an environment where the information flow back and forth is there. I hired you to do the job. I'm not going to micromanage you doing the job, but I need to understand in basic terms what it is that you're doing.
Right.
I think that changes depending on the role with the principal and who the principal is. If I'm the principal to the CEO in a big 30,000 person company with multiple chiefs of staff, my depth of knowledge in each department is going to have to be much, much deeper. Okay. So I feel like I'm rambling. I'm going to let you ask the next question.
You're not rambling. It's all good. It's all gold that we're uncovering here. All right. Okay. So thinking about John comes into the chief of staff job. You haven't met a lot of these people before. What do you think their misconceptions about you as the chief of staff were? So the two pieces, what are they thinking about the chief of staff? And what are they thinking about you? What did you see when you came in?
I'm going to tell you a story. My first client team at the McChrystal Group, we were working for a software company in Santa Barbara. And the team leader gave me the task of, John, you are going to present to the group on this day. This is your topic. Prepare as if you would prepare for anything. I rehearsed mentally. I had it down. The day of the presentation came, I delivered it flawlessly, if you ask me. Asked for questions, no questions. I go up to the team leader afterwards. I'm like, hey, Jeff, can I get some feedback so that I can do better next time? And he's like, yeah, man, let's go into this room over here. He said, you know why you didn't get any questions? You scared the hell out of the room. You're way too militant. You sounded like a drill sergeant. You need to soften everything about your delivery. Well, and I did. At that point, I learned, or at least I like to think I learned, that I needed to soften my delivery. In the chief of staff role, I think people expected more of a drill sergeant. Okay. I think people, just from me specifically, knowing my background, the Hollywood misconception of what the Navy SEAL brings to the table versus, hey, I'm a person just like you are. Having the opportunity to show that to people, to break down those misconceptions. What was the other part of the question? The role in general?
The staff was supposed to be doing. You know, they're like, okay, we got this guy. He's a SEAL. I'm supposed to be, maybe he's a drill sergeant for us. What do they think the chief of staff was supposed to be doing?
I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings. The executive team especially, I think at first they felt threatened. I lived with the CEO. I had complete exposure to every single meeting and all information. So I had the same contextual understanding as the CEO. I think that they thought I was going to use that as a lever, but to tell them how to do their jobs, to speak with the CEO's authority. I think once they saw how I used influence instead to get everybody to make everybody aware of the knowledge, the details that I had, you decide how that's going to impact your role. I'm just giving you the knowledge. I'm not here to tell you how to do your job.
Okay, so you couldn't swing around your relationship with the CEO like a big stick, right?
I didn't want to. I didn't want to be that person. Because I can't establish a trusting relationship with any of the other senior leaders if that's how they see me. I remember we brought in, when the co-founder at CEO realized that he was a limiting factor operationally, he stepped back and made himself the chief strategy officer. And we brought in a woman that had been in the automotive industry for 30 years as the chief operating officer. And I don't think she appreciated what I was doing until I moderated a meeting between legal and her. It was an internal meeting, and it was it was going south quick, and I was able to keep a 10,000 foot altitude, keep everybody focused on the goals, and look for points of agreement and kind of move it forward. And I think I really earned the COO's respect in that moment.
Okay. So yeah, you got to take advantage of these things when they pop across your desk, and there's going to be a lot of things popping across your desk. So we talked a lot about soft skills related to the chief of staff role, not being functional. Traditional metrics of how you're doing might be really difficult to apply. How do you know when you're doing a good job in the chief of staff role?
I've talked about the relationships, the value of creating relationships where people are willing to share information. I think you taught me, Matt, that creating a relationship where feedback is near real time. In this environment, for me, I needed feedback immediately from people, whether or not things were going well, if I was handling the situation correctly, because there was no time, and there was less forgiveness in getting it wrong in the environment because it was moving very quickly. So for me to know whether or not it was going well, I had to do it by immediate feedback from the people that I was interacting with.
Did you have to ask for that?
I think at first I did, just in the creating of the relationship. But the idea was to create an ease of giving the feedback, that it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't emotional.
Okay. What do you think was hard about that? You had all this experience. Oh, John's perfectly suited for it. He's got all these things. Like, what was difficult about it? As you're looking back, is just like, oh yeah, that was really a tough thing that we had to do.
Dealing with external partners who have their own priorities and goals, and trying to get those to align with ours, understanding that everybody's trying to make a profit. Everybody's trying to keep their shareholders or their investors happy. Finding that alignment internally and externally was very challenging for me because I didn't know the industry to begin with. Okay. I consider myself a quick learner or a constant learner, and my attention was internal. CEO, you're gonna take care of all the external relationships. Right now, I don't have that kind of bandwidth. I need to learn the business. That was very challenging for me, finding those points of integration. I sat in on all the meetings with the external partners, and I took a lot of notes. The learning curve was steep.
As people are thinking about like how they get better in the chief of staff position, what are some of the things that you did to improve your performance, to improve the skills that you knew you needed? I know we talked about feedback already. What are some of the other things that you did?
Yeah. I consider myself a keen observer of human behavior. So putting people first and understanding, as I said earlier, what motivates them and what's important to them, for me, allowed me to be a little more efficient. I could cut through red tape and bureaucracy by going straight to the source, the relationship that I had established that would get me up to speed as quick as possible. That was one thing I had to do. I had to lean on the subject matter expertise of lots of individual contributors, lots of different managerial people up and down the chain of command. Okay.
So, I mean, part of what I'm taking away is you got to get really good at being able to understand where people are coming from, what's motivating them. And I guess the thing is, coming from the guy who was a Navy SEAL who's done really hard stuff, it turns out empathy is one of the most important things.
Yeah, right. Being able to look at somebody and say, I don't know, can you help me? Like, as the chief of staff, who, like, this is the guy that's that's living with the CEO, he really must know what's going on. To be standing in front of a 20-some-year-old sales kid saying, I don't understand this. Can you educate me? I think that surprised a lot of people, but at the same time, it changed the dynamic, like right away, how they looked at me and how more willing they were to share with me. So being able to say, I don't know, can you teach me this? That was very, very helpful. Setting the ego aside, so to speak.
Sure. All right. Well,
Empathy.
When you think
Yes.
about those chiefs of staff that are inspiring, who's your favorite chief of staff that you've seen on TV or, in a book or anything like that?
Okay. There used to be this show on called Madam Secretary.
Okay.
I think it was a take on when Hillary was Secretary of State, but the actress was a gal named Tia. I don't know. I'm not good with actor and actresses' names. Anyway, her chief of staff was a guy named Russell Jackson.
Okay.
And he was the ultimate in influence. He understood what it was that motivated people, and in that political DC world, that in and of itself is gold. And he had been working the corridors in that town for so long. He knew everybody. He knew what everybody needed. He knew how to connect dots. He had no authority, but the influence was the secretary leaned on him heavily. And I just appreciate the way that he filled the role. He knew when to show an edge. He knew when to be soft and empathetic. He was a well-rounded sort of guy.
Nice. Good stuff. Well,
it was a well-written role, I guess I should say.
Nice. Well, the actor's got to do his part too, right?
That's right.
Okay. So thanks a ton, John. That was a great conversation. Obviously, we've learned about your perspective around the role. So thank you very much for being willing to share that with us.
Sure. Thank you.